Welcome to this week's episode of the Picture This podcast with me, Adam Lehrhaupt. And I am very excited to bring on my special guest this week. Her name is Carmen Oliver, and she is an author in her own right, a public speaker, a school visit diva, and the princess of the booking biz, which brings authors and illustrators to schools all over the country. So welcome, Carmen. Happy to have you.
Oh, Adam, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be a guest. I love what you're doing here. I love that you've started this podcast. You're the perfect host for this. You bring so much charm and charisma and knowledge and passion for writing for kids. And I'm just so excited to spend a few minutes with your audience and our favorite people, teachers and librarians and parents and homeschool parents and students. So thank you.
I want to go back. So you and I have known each other for a while, and I think we met at the Highlights Foundation. So we had kind of talked a little bit before that, but we met at the Highlights Foundation in Pennsylvania, and we sat down and we talked a little bit about school visits. And it was mostly me pitching how I do school visits to you so that you could help me get more school visits. But one of the things that we talked about, which really resonated with me because it's how I see school visits, is when you said that you want all of the people there to enjoy themselves. But more than that, you want to leave them with something. So you want them to have a takeaway that's more than just, well, that was fun. And that's something that I have put into every single school visit that I've put together. And every time I go into a situation where I'm talking about my books, whether it's to schools or even to other authors, I want them to be building something with me together so that they go away with something new and unique and creative, and hopefully a desire to create more or to do more and express themselves more. So can you talk a little bit about how that works with you and how you kind of made that a core of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I totally believe in that. We had so many great discussions around that. I just feel like you are there most importantly for the audience. You're not there for yourself. And I think that's so important for us to remember. And it's not just when we're talking to students, it's teachers and educators, whether we're at a keynote at a largest conference or we're doing a workshop and helping other writers or illustrators with their craft. You know, you always want to leave your audience with information that's going to help them. And just like we talked about then, that's one of the things that I love that you do in your school visits as well. And one of the things that I like to do in my school visits, after we have Bears Make the Best Reading Buddies, you know, I like to have a little discussion with them, because then it's like, oh, well, you guys probably know what makes a great reading buddy. I'll do some silly, exaggerated things like, oh, does a good reading buddy, you know, jump up and down as a good trait? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, well, does a good reading buddy like hug the book when you're trying to read together or pull your hair? Never, you know. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, you tell me what makes a good reading buddy. And that's kind of how we kind of launch into having some engagement throughout the presentation. But I always like to leave them with a challenge, because like once we finish talking about everything that makes a good reading buddy and all the things that goes into writing a good book that some of them are already doing, I'm reinforcing what they're already doing in school. I like to challenge them. The book may be Bears Make the Best Reading Buddies, but I usually throw in whatever their school is. It's the Tigers make the best reading, or it's narwhals that make the best reading buddies, whatever their school mascot may be.
I want to go to the narwhal school for sure.
And it's so great. I want them to tell me, I want them to create their stories. And so when we were in West Texas, I had a teacher there in first grade, several teachers that did that with all of their students. And they all created this amazing book for all of their students, and it's called Jaguars Make the Best Reading Buddies. And now all of those kids in those classes are all published authors. Their names are in the back of the book. Their illustrations, their stories are in the book, and it's incredible. Like, and there's the creativity that comes from them. Like one of them was, chickens make the best reading buddies because they can weigh up to 18 pounds, so they can carry the books for me. They can use their beaks to turn the pages, by Justin.
18 pounds of books. They've
Right?
definitely been to the library with me before.
Right, exactly. So I love that. So I like to leave them with that challenge that they can create a better story than I've done. And,
Yeah.
we've talked all about the elements of a good story, and their imaginations are firing. Now these kids are seeing themselves in their first book as a published author. And so I love being able to leave them with that challenge.
So there's two things I want to pull out of this. So the first one is that we're talking about being a published author. So when I go into a school and I talk to students about writing, I am the same as you. If you write, we are the same. The only difference is
Right.
I've been published.
Right.
That's the only difference. And a story that I tell all the time is about second grade. I wrote a story, a whole book that I illustrated myself. And we know I don't illustrate. It was called The Little Red Airplane. And The Little Red Airplane is a terrible, terrible story. I can give you the whole thing really quick. Once there was a little red airplane, looked like this. There was also a mountain. The little red airplane flew.
Oh my gosh. That is such a great story.
That's the whole thing. It's not it has the makings of something that could grow. Someday
Yeah.
I'll write, a full book about silly little red airplane. But that was my whole thing. I stapled it together and put it in the library. So I think that's kind of a fun distinction. And I love what the educators at that school did for you and for the kids.
Yeah.
That's something that I want to hit home here, is that I'm not trying to say that educators aren't doing amazing things. They are doing amazing things. And the ideas that they come up with, when I go in for a school visit, you know how it is. It's not just something like this. The displays they do, the art projects they put together, the work that goes into all of that is fantastic. What I want to do with this podcast and with everything I'm doing around it is hopefully make some of that easier.
Correct.
Right? So instead of having to do so much work every year, all the time, it's so much work that they do, I want to just provide some resources for those creative ideas, or even just places that they can go for inspiration.
Those first-time teachers too, right? That are coming out and it's a little overwhelming and they're starting their classroom for the first time. Hopefully this will be helpful for those as well. And just like you said, inspiration, because sometimes when you hear about one idea, it sparks another.
Yeah, and which it does. What is something other than what you've shared? What are some of the things that you've seen, or that some of your authors or illustrators have shared with you that were like, oh my God, this was a cool project. This was something that I saw at this school, or that they did for me at this school, that we can share here on the podcast and say, here's something that other educators are doing that we can bring to you.
I can speak specifically to one challenge that I saw with the librarian, Jana Barrick in California. She used building an Orchestra of Hope, how Fabio Chavez taught children to make music from trash. She used that as the inspiration for the book. And she worked with classes. It's a K-8 school, so it goes all the way. So she worked with 8th graders with a picture book as well, which I think is just another reminder. Like, picture books are, a conversation starter for any grade. Right. And so I love that she really embraced that, and she took the story and used it as inspiration. And they had a build an instrument challenge. And so all the students were to build their own instruments out of trash, out of recycled materials. And they were they had to have different sounds. The instrument had to make different sounds so that they could show different frequency, different pitch. They had to be able to try and play some short little tune on the instrument, and they had to provide a written write-up of how they built the instrument, the materials they needed as well, so that somebody else could then turn around and build that instrument. And then they did like a short little speech with their friend. I think they did it in pairs. They did it together. And so they did a little demonstration, a little speech in front of class to tell them about that project and what the materials they used. And they played the little tune that they did. So it was just such an all-encompassing amazing project inspiring for these kids. And they also learned what's happening around the world over in Paraguay, what was happening in a different culture, what were students their age, what were the challenges and obstacles they were up against, right?
Really is scalable. So like it's a project that you can do kindergartens, you could go all the way up to like it's a very scalable project, right?
Exactly. And so I really loved how she thought outside of the box with that too, it also ticked off so many boxes with so much different curriculum, so many components of that. It was science and STEM related, it was literacy, and it was public speaking, and there was a social studies aspect as the kids were doing research, right? And also the STEM of figuring out what they were going to build. And so there were just so many components to it too. It's fascinating when you see somebody take inspiration from your book and then it blows your mind because they just scale it up.
Again, part of where the concept behind this comes from is just my interaction with educators who are looking at my books differently. And as you know, like I encourage that with my writing is what can a book be other than just a book? How do you make it an experience? How do you take it away from just the story and turn it into an event? Right? And a project like that does that in a unique and fun way.
I remember another author team when Grandfather Gandhi came out, and it was illustrated by Evan Turk, and it was written by Bethany Hegedus and also co-authored with Arun Gandhi, who is now deceased. But they did a huge mural at the school. So Evan came in, they were going to be doing a school visit, and they dedicated a wall so that he could help create this mural for the students. And I've seen that happen as well with author illustrator Jabaka Steptoe, where they've invited him in and he's worked with students and they've crafted this incredible elaborate art project that now in the school, on the school walls, it gives the kids boost their self-esteem knowing that they were a part of it as well, and builds confidence. So I love it when we can do things like that.
Yeah, it really does elevate everything. And in the end, everything that we're trying to do is about the students, right?
Yes.
Unfortunately, we live in a world where it's so much easier to connect to a device than it is to a book. And like when I tell people how many books I read every year, they're like, what? Where do you find the time? All that time you spend on your phone or on watching TV, I'm reading books. Like
I know.
It's this little thing people have been doing thousands of years.
I know. And my grandkids, I've got 3 grandbabies now too. They have little libraries. We're very fortunate. They have an author as a Mimi. The books keep coming, and so, but they love my second grader. He's he's into Harry Potter reading and reading Percy Jackson, and he's reading nonfiction about science and astronomy and bugs. Oh my gosh, you can't buy that kid enough bug books, so it's just so cool, and my son actually he didn't start being immediately drawn to books. It was figuring out what kids are interested in and then helping to guide them in that. So for him, it was National Geographic kid magazines to start with. He was fascinated with all of the nonfiction and the glossy photos, and then he wanted to know what it said underneath. So sometimes it's not just it's looking at various kinds of mediums to get kids involved.
And it can be, I've talked to librarians about this all the time. I have a son who didn't connect with books until he got into manga, right? So Bleach was the gateway book, and it was an accident. I was at a friend's house, and my friend his wife is from Japan, and they happen to have a lot of that stuff around the house. And my son was just flipping through it on the table, and I was like, do you like that? He's like, yeah. Well, luckily there's 57 more books of just that one series that you can read. So like finding that connection, finding that which brings us to a good place. So I have a little segment that we do called Adam's Book Bag. And this is where we talk about a particular book. So a picture book can be one of yours. It can be another one that you hold up when you're talking about writing or reading or connecting people with some of those things. So what book do you have in your book bag?
So in my book bag, I have the Twilight Library that I wrote, and it's illustrated by Miranazian Laura. And I love using this book because it's written in a lyrical voice. It is got a lovely, lots of beautiful figurative language. It's a bedtime book, but it's also about like when I came up with the idea for the book, it's like, where do the creatures of the night go for library? Right? The libraries are closed. And so what I love about this book is I can do stuff in school visits with it, where we can play the five senses game, because we're using so much sensory details. You know, I can ask the kids to tell me what the five senses are. And then once they do, then we say, well, who wants to play the five senses game? And kids always want to play a game. And so they get to pull words out of the hat. And then we have to figure out, is this a smell sense? Is this a sight sense? Is it sound or taste or touch? And then we can put it up on the board. And then back in the classroom, after I go, they can build their poem of sensory details. So taking one word from Twilight Library, like I had a whole bunch of children in California, and they had these beautiful walls of all of their poems that they had created. They'd made simile poems. And Smoke by Lena, she said, smoke smells spicy like a ghost pepper. Smoke tastes tangy like smoked salmon. Smoke feels hot like a day in summer. Smoke sounds crackly like when you turn on the stove. And smoke looks spooky like a cloud. And now again, here you are building their confidence. They've created these beautiful poems. You've taught them about sensory and descriptive details using the five senses.
Getting in touch with the world around them. My first episode that I recorded was with Lisa Rogers. We were talking about a very similar kind of thing, like writing what you see or hear or feel. And it's a very simple and easy way to connect, especially very young creators, with something that they can actually understand. And it works for everyone. So you might not have all of your senses, but you have some of them.
Right.
And we can connect you in a way to being creative. If you can touch something, if you can smell something, if you can see something, we can connect you to expressing that creatively. And it as soon as they can talk, really.
Yeah. And I think it also, like, reminding them that, like, when you hear those things, it reminds you, it's relatable. Like, you can actually picture it in your head. Like, it pulls you in to the scene. Like, you're actually, like, when you feel like you're tasting something like marshmallows, like, you automatically can, like, know what that's happening in your mouth, that sensation, right? Like, and so when you do that, and when you make your writing interesting like that by using those kinds of details, you're making it come alive, where people, like, are actually feeling it. The reader along with you is feeling it, right? And so when you explain that to kids get it. And I love hearing what they come up with, just reminding us all to embrace our inner child. I know you do this all the time. You know, you're just so child at heart.
Sometimes I'm told I should embrace my outer adult, but yeah, the inner child has always been a little easier for me to grasp onto. I love that book in your book bag. We're going to do Story Sparks next. So this is the other thing that I do every episode. And this is just a creative suggestion that you're going to provide here that can spark student engagement in some way for educators or librarians or even just parents.
I always love to involve the kids in the prompt. Like, what is it they're interested in? Like, can kids choose the rides, as Kwame Alexander says? Can we let them choose off the menu what they want to order? Can we do that with story prompts? What is something that kids are already interested in? Can we use pictures, collages, magazines? When they have computer time, have them find in, obviously parent-controlled, school-controlled internet, but find pictures that they're like, wow, that's so cool, and use that as a story starter, or just to write about what they're thinking, what could be happening there. Maybe they're really interested in nonfiction. So, like, what's it living as a wolf spider in what they might encounter? What would their day look like? So I love trying to engage them with starting with things that they're interested in. And it always reminds me, even my son in university, when he's taking English, if he can write about something that he is interested in, it's always going to be a winning combination.
I really like that as a connection, especially to nonfiction, and a lot of, again, a lot of younger kids get really into nonfiction, and then it seems to go away at some age. I think that's just because nonfiction gets a little more difficult as it gets longer, but especially with stories in the news now, like people are recreating like dire wolves, right? So we've got these dire wolves out there. What is a day like,
right?
For a dire wolf? Read the article, and then tell me what a dire wolf day is like.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool because we have some facts around it, but it's still like we don't really know, right?
Really know.
So it lets them do both things.
Yeah. And even perspective, I think too, like you can do perspective type art stories as prompts. What would it be like, for example, thinking of a child, what would you see if you looked through a knothole in a fence? What's on the other side of that? Like almost getting down on all fours and seeing things at their young level. Like what is catching their attention? What are they seeing? Whose point of view would you be telling that from, right? It kind of goes to the same, but like telling it from the dire wolf point of view, or telling it the prey's point of view, like sitting up in the tree who might be, what about that little bird, Like, so I think that can be really fun. And it can also give kids, again, a little bit of control in helping to choose what they write about.
Yeah, I really like that. I want to go back to something that we talked about briefly before, which is there's kind of this myth that picture books are only for younger students. And I know that you give presentations to adults.
Yes.
And I feel like this is a great topic for the two of us because I do my adult education stuff is all picture book based, not just because I don't like writing things over 400 words long, but because it really is easy to showcase something by using a picture book. If I only have 200 or 300 words, that's easy for me to have somebody in a classroom read, and then we can jump into how does this connect with the real world around you? What are some of the other ways that you see paths to using picture books that are outside of that 8 and under kind of crowd or 10 and under crowd?
I feel picture books are the perfect conversation starters for new subject material for older grades. And I'm going to put My Voice for the Spirit Bears as one particular one. It's about a boy who at the ages of 13, 14, found out that these threatened bears called spirit bears or commodity bears, their habitat was under attack. And what made them very unique is they were kind of like the Canada's panda, in that they were only found in one very remote location in Canada. They had a double recessive gene. So if they bred with bears outside of their forest, they would lost forever. And he was 13, 14 years old. So all he wanted to do was just to make sure that those bears had a safe habitat. You can talk about activism with kids. You can talk to them about what can you do? Is there something going on in your own community, in your own house? Is there things that you're interested in that you want to change? And in my story, my main character, based on a true story, he writes letters to the government, to everybody. He puts together a youth coalition of 6-7 million kids around 60, 70 different countries in the world. So it has a ripple effect, right? And so I think once you find out what they're interested in, what's important to them at their core, you can invite them to what would you want to do? How would you want to use your voice to make a difference? And I think picture books do that so well. I also think it's a great way to introduce research and revision, because you and I know how much time goes researching either a project if you're doing nonfiction, or revising it again and again. Sometimes we write a story it's too short and we have to add to it.
Or change the voice. I mean, I like to write in omnipresent narrative view, but like my first written from the viewpoint of the person reading the story was completely different when it was written in that third person style, right? So taking it out of that and changing one thing, right? And it's like the arc of the story doesn't change. You're really changing one thing. Or when you talk about you're in 9th grade or 10th grade, you have to write an essay.
Right.
Okay. Well, here's a picture book. Okay. There's 300 words in this picture book. If I change one of those words, it can completely change the whole narrative in the picture book. So
Right.
think about your essay, right? You're writing an essay. Your essay is, I mean, it's not going to be hard, like it's not going to be too much longer than that. But your essay, if you get one word wrong, right, or misplaced, or you don't think about it. So going back and revising, I think that's a great kind of parallel. And thinking about the medium, right? So it doesn't necessarily just have to be, here's this book. It can be the medium of writing short, right? And cutting out the fat.
Yeah, cutting out the fat. And I also think it's fun too, like there's so many projects that can be done with picture books too, like for the older grades. What would it be like if they built a book trailer for it, you know? What if they had to create a commercial for that book? How would you sell that? Who's your market? Like you could have so much fun with those older grades, because then you're incorporating, again, you're incorporating public speaking. You've got to create scripts for it. You know, you've got to do visual aids, and you know, like there's multimedia, like there's so many things that you're all now tying together.
You could do a debate for the book and against the book.
Right?
Like, and right?
That would be so fun.
I so desperately want somebody to do that with one of my books now. Please take one of my books and have a debate as to what, like, for or against. And I don't care if it's for or against the content of the book, the color of the book, whether it should be monkeys or parakeets. Like an argument, just like for and against it would be amazing.
I love it. It could even be something like wordplay against versus idea jar. You know, right?
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. And then the books could be battling it out. Like you have to take on the persona of this book and what it stands for and explain why it's, or you could do an election, right?
Yeah.
So which book are we electing president of the library?
Oh, totally. Oh, totally. I love it. No, I think there's so much, I mean, and there's so much you can really do with picture books. And I'm writing, whether you're writing an essay for narrative nonfiction, whether you're trying to incorporate and have them inspire them to write fiction. I mean, we still do this as authors for any nonfiction project. You talk to most authors that write nonfiction, they will go to their library and they will first start with all the picture books that are out there on the topic that they're looking at, right? Because picture books do such a great job of boiling down the essence of the story in as few words, and just the words that matter to tell the story.
Yeah.
And
you have to let the pictures tell some of it, right? So it's how few words can I use,
right,
and still leave room for the story to be drawn.
And it's about writing visually, right? It's like, that's why choosing your words is so important, and why we always say use descriptive language, use the five senses, because you're trying to get you're trying to paint a story for the illustrator with the clues, right? And leave the room for him to tell the rest of the story. Yeah. So it's, and I think older kids really get that. Like they get that it's like a big sandbox and they get to go and play, and they can even write their own picture books. For those that are artists, they do comics, they can do illustration. For those that don't feel like they're as good at drawing, although that's totally learnable, there's all kinds of other like medium that they can use, and collage, and like it can be a really fun project too.
Yeah, there's some phenomenal collage style picture books.
The Pumphrey brothers use stamps. James Ransom's got some beautiful collages with Game Changers with his wife, Lisa Klein Ransom. No, it's just incredible. And I think, you know, especially when you've got a bigger art department in middle and high school even, you know, and even elementary too. I mean, I've seen 4th and 5th graders put together book trailers. You know, Emily Gardner over at Caldwell Heights that was a project that she was doing. She's the librarian there, and she would have them a book trailer for a book that they were doing, or for an author that was coming in. So there's just so much you can do.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. In closing, we want to let people know, where can they find you? Like, where are we directing people, and how do we learn more about the great Carmen Oliver?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. You can find me on my website at carmenoliver.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. So I'm happy to respond to your emails and your letters. And just thank you again for having me, Adam. It's just been a blast to talk about our two passions.
It has been a lot of fun. It's been great catching up with you as well. And I'll put links to all of the places where you can get Carmen below. So take a look there. And thank you for joining us for Picture This.